The atmosphere in the studio had shifted from tense to explosive. Yet Hugh Grant stood with a calmness that felt almost unnerving. Lorraine Kelly, once the queen of effortless on-air control, sat stiffly in her chair, her confidence leaking away with every breath. The cameras kept rolling, hungry for every second of this unfolding disaster. Hugh stepped closer to her desk, not aggressively, but with the steady presence of a man who had decided he would no longer tolerate being mistreated. "You want to talk about authenticity?" he said, his voice softer now, almost gentle but laced with undeniable truth. "Let's talk about the real you." Lorraine blinked rapidly. "You don't know anything about me," she murmured, her voice trembling with both anger and something more vulnerable. "I know enough," he replied. "I know you didn't start your career this way. You used to care. You used to treat people with kindness. What happened to that person, Lorraine? When did she disappear?" The question hit her like a punch to the chest. For the first time, she couldn't hide behind sarcasm or bravado. She swallowed hard, unable to form an answer. Hugh continued, "I came here to talk about a film I'm proud of, a film made by people who work their hearts out. And instead, I walked into an ambush." He shook his head. "Not because you wanted a meaningful conversation, but because you wanted drama. You wanted cruelty. You wanted a moment that would go viral." Lorraine's hands trembled as she reached for her water glass. "This is television," she whispered, trying to gather strength. "You don't survive unless you keep people interested. And you think cruelty is the way to do that?" Hugh countered. "You think hurting people makes good television?" Her silence answered for her. Hugh leaned forward slightly. "You say I hide behind charm. But what exactly are you hiding behind? This persona you've created? This sharp, cutting host who confuses? Rudeness with honesty? Do you really think the world needs more of that?" Lorraine's throat tightened. For the first time since the confrontation began, she looked genuinely shaken, not by Hugh's anger, but by his accuracy. He placed a small paper on her desk, his publicist's number. "When you're ready to apologize," he said quietly, "give her a call. Not just for today, but for all the people you've treated this way." He turned to leave. Lorraine, panicked and clinging to the last shard of her pride, called out, "Running away again, Hugh? Just like always when things get difficult." Hugh stopped. The entire studio froze. Slowly, he turned his head. His expression was calm, tired, and utterly resolute. "I'm not running," he said. "I'm walking away. There's a difference. I choose not to spend another second around someone who has forgotten what it means to be human." With that, he stepped out of the studio. The cameras captured everything. A bully exposed, a persona shattered, and a moment that would follow her forever. What happens when a beloved actor sits down for what should be a simple morning chat only to face the most shocking display of unprofessional behavior ever caught on live television? In just 37 seconds, one comment from the host would expose her true character and leave millions of viewers absolutely stunned. Gary Oldman walked into the bright studio that morning with a warm, genuine smile, completely unaware that he was about to step into one of the most hostile interviews of his career. He had arrived early, greeted every crew member politely, and carried himself with the calm confidence of a man who had been doing this for decades. Everything about his presence suggested a relaxed, friendly conversation ahead. But something was off the moment he sat down. Lorraine Kelly welcomed him with her usual morning show brightness. But there was an edge beneath her words, subtle, sharp, almost metallic. Gary felt it immediately. The lights seemed harsher, the air in the room strangely thick, and the crew exchanged looks that hinted they already sensed something brewing. Still, Gary stayed composed, ready to talk about the film he'd poured his heart into. He adjusted the sleeve of his jacket, settled into the plush chair, and prepared for a normal interview. He had no idea he was walking into an ambush. "So, Gary," Lorraine began, flipping through her notes with a stiff, almost irritated motion. "Let's talk about your new film. Though I have to say, I'm not entirely sure why you chose this particular project." Gary blinked. A strange opening, but he shrugged it off. "Well, the script was extraordinary," he replied politely. "The character spoke to me." "Spoke to you?" Lorraine cut him off sharply. "Interesting, because I watched it last night and found it rather forgettable." The air shifted instantly. Gary's expression barely moved, but the audience could feel the subtle shock radiating from him. This wasn't banter. This wasn't tough journalism. This was something else. "I'm sorry to hear it didn't connect with you," he said carefully, keeping his tone level. "Oh, please," Lorraine scoffed. "Don't give me that diplomatic actor nonsense." Crew members exchanged glances. Something was going very wrong, very fast. Gary tried to steer things back to professionalism, but Lorraine wasn't interested. She leaned forward, voice dripping with condescension, pushing harder, sharper, crossing lines most interviewers wouldn't even approach. And as her tone escalated, Gary recognized what this truly was, not an interview, but a setup. A deliberate, calculated attempt to humiliate him on live TV. And the worst was still to come. Gary took a slow breath, trying to maintain the calm professionalism he had carried into the studio. But the tension in the room was growing thicker by the second. Lorraine leaned back in her chair with a smugness that unsettled even the crew behind the cameras. She wasn't asking questions. She was provoking him, needling him, pushing him toward a breaking point she seemed almost eager to witness. "Your last 3 projects," she said loudly. Loudly enough that even producers in the control room winced. "Have been disappointing. Don't you think it's time to be a little more realistic? You're not 25 anymore." The comment sliced through the studio like a blade. Gary's breath caught for a moment, not out of insecurity, but out of pure disbelief. Age. That was her angle now. He straightened slightly, fixing her with a calm but firm look. "My age has nothing to do with my ability to perform at the highest level," Gary answered quietly. "Experience enhances a craft, Lorraine. It doesn't diminish it." "Does it though?" she pushed, tilting her head in mock curiosity. "Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you're taking whatever roles you can get." The air crackled. A few camera operators shifted uncomfortably. No one dared say anything, but the discomfort was obvious. Gary felt his patience thinning, but he refused to stoop to her level. "Lorraine," he said, choosing his words with care, "I came here to discuss a project I'm incredibly proud of. I didn't expect hostility." "Hostility?" Lorraine laughed, short, fake, and sharp. "I'm just being honest. Isn't that what journalists do?" "There's honesty," Gary replied steadily. "And then there's cruelty." That word struck her. Her smile twitched, just a fraction, revealing something darker beneath. But she didn't stop. She leaned forward again, her voice dropping into a tone that was almost predatory. "Well, if we're being honest," she continued, "your personal life has been colorful. All those relationships, all that drama. Doesn't that affect how audiences see you?" The question hit the room like an explosion. Boundaries shattered. Crew members froze. Gary didn't move for a long moment. He simply stared at her, stunned that she would dare bring his personal life, decades old, long resolved, into a morning show setting. "My personal life," Gary said slowly, "is not up for discussion." "Everything is up for discussion," she shot back. "That's the price of fame." "No," Gary said firmly. "It isn't." Lorraine smirked, clearly pleased with herself. She had crossed a line, and she knew it. But she had no idea how much further she was about to go. Gary's jaw tightened as he sat there, trying to hold onto the last threads of professionalism. Anyone watching could see that the interview had gone far beyond uncomfortable. It had become openly hostile. Yet Lorraine showed no sign of stopping. Her eyes glinted with a strange satisfaction, as if she were feeding off the tension she was creating. "So," she said, crossing her arms, "you really think none of your difficulties over the years have affected your career?" The word hung in the air like poison. Crew members exchanged anxious glances. A producer in the control room could be heard shouting, "Cut to commercial, now." But the director hesitated. What was unfolding on screen was chaotic, shocking, undeniably gripping. No one wanted to look away. Gary's patience snapped, not in anger, but in disbelief. "Lorraine," he said slowly, "you need to be very careful about what you're implying." "Implying?" She repeated with exaggerated innocence. "I'm stating facts. Your life has been chaotic, tumultuous. People talk. People wonder about your judgment." That was the moment the atmosphere shifted entirely. Gary leaned back slightly, a cold calm settling over him, a dangerous calm. The kind that comes only when someone has been pushed far beyond what's reasonable. "You want to talk about judgment?" he said quietly. "Let's talk about yours. About the judgment of a host who ambushes her guest on live television." Lorraine's smile faltered. Just a flicker. But Gary saw it. The audience saw it. She was losing control. "I'm asking questions," she snapped. "That's my job." "No," Gary replied. Your job is to interview your guest, not attack them. Lorraine stood abruptly, her chair scraping loudly across the studio floor. How dare you imply I'm unprofessional, she hissed. I've been doing this for years. And it shows, Gary said calmly. Just not in the way you think. Her breathing quickened. All the polished TV persona she'd built over decades was unraveling in real time. Oh please, she shot back. At least I show up to work sober. The studio froze. Gasps echoed across the room. A camera operator lowered his rig involuntarily. A makeup artist standing off to the side covered her mouth. Even the director in the control room shouted, "Oh my God, did she just say that?" Gary didn't move. He didn't blink. He simply stared at her, his expression turning to something icy and heartbreakingly disappointed. "Did you really just bring up my recovery on live television?" he asked quietly. Lorraine's face drained of color. She realized instantly she had gone too far, but the words were already out. The damage was done, and the world had just heard every syllable.